Okay, so for some people, what we go through today might be stuff that you already know, but the truth is, a lot of us just don't slow down long enough to really thoroughly think about this. So even if you feel like, oh, this is stuff I'm already familiar with, I think it's a really great time to just revisit some of these things. Maybe something's changed for you. Maybe you know there's a change coming up, and really make some notes and think about how you might want to adjust some of what you're already doing if this is something that's really familiar to you. If it's something new to you, then great. Hopefully, you're walking away with some good tools on how to approach social media. And again, it's going to vary from platform to platform. So, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn and TikTok, they're all different formats that have similarities, but a lot of times maybe you want to be thinking about how you're strategically approaching it a little bit differently. So just to share with you guys, like I do have some clients where we pretty much just completely mirror the content that's happening on Instagram and Facebook. And then we handle like comments and things like that a little bit differently for each platform. We always look at Facebook groups as something unique that's only belongs to that platform. That is a great place to cultivate fans, followers, new relationships, potential customers. Really, if you're going to do like mirrored posts on those two platforms, you want to make sure that you still get into Facebook groups because it's probably one of the most um, like rich places to mine for new customers when it comes to using Facebook. So the other thing too that brings up is if you're creating content and you're editing it in app, so you're using the app to go ahead and create your video, that might be something if you want to go multi-platform that you really consider if you do want to stick with that because it makes it a little bit more challenging to make customizations or changes or retain that content if you're using the in-app editor versus if you're using a separate editor and then you've got a video that can be posted up onto the individual platforms. It's easier to make changes. You have complete control over that content that you can go back and edit it if you need to. I used to recommend using TikTok, their CapCut editing software. Like it used to allow you to download it without a watermark, without posting it. So I thought, that was definitely a tool that I used and then posted it without the watermark onto Instagram, say, and Facebook. But since then, they actually have made it where you can't download the video without posting it to TikTok. So you have to post it, make it live, and then you can download it without the watermark. So, some clients I'll just tell, well, if you feel comfortable with it, you can just go ahead and post it on your TikTok, download it, and then you can either choose to leave that content there or erase that content and delete it if you want to and still use the software. But that's been like a little bit of a change that maybe might make you want to actually move off of in-app editing altogether. So we're going to go through the different steps and break down the process of what your social media should look like ideally. And I think this is good because a lot of times we're just flying by the seat of our pants, like, what should we post today? And looking for an idea. Okay, like I've got this picture, and let me go ahead and put this up. But really, the idea that we want to get across is the planning of what you're doing is what allows there to be more strategy to what you're doing. So taking a step back and looking at the longer term picture is going to help you with strategy. So step one is going to be ideation or brainstorming. To me, this can happen at any point in time. And oftentimes, like the best ideas come up when you're at a grocery store or you're like showering or like some time when creativity just kind of hits you and you come up with an idea. And I found too that if you don't record that some ideas somewhere, oftentimes it can just come into your brain and then leave your brain as it gets pushed out with some of the other business that you have. So really finding a place to put that idea or content is like a great idea, great tool to have. Like I use a Apple Note to do that, but there's, you can use your planner, you can use like other Notion or other types of note-taking apps that exist to go ahead and capture that idea. The second step is going to be content planning and content creation. So again, this is really where you look at a little bit more of like, what does the month look like? And then maybe your approach is nailing down what you're going to create for that month and then working through it at a little bit more of a manageable pace. If like looking at it and tackling it on a weekly basis is going to make more sense for you time-wise, but really having an idea going into the month of what that month is going to look like, if not even longer term than that. And then copywriting. So really analyzing and thinking about what goes into your description or your caption, if you will, instead of just putting up whatever is coming to you in the moment. Because there's some things to consider when you're doing that. Okay, so a little bit more on step one, the brainstorming. So again, I like to make it a place that's easy to open. Usually all of us have our phone and we carry it with us all the time. So generally that's going to be one of the best places to put it. And then what I also like to do is to set a new collection on Instagram so that as I'm going through Instagram, I can save things to that collection. You can call it like brainstorm or new ideas, where something, if it stirs your creativity, or even if you like the post and you want to create something really similar to that, you can save it to that collection on Instagram, and you have this whole queue of ideas that you can turn to when you're going to the process of like figuring out what you want to see in the upcoming month. So if you don't already have that done, take a minute right now to do that. So make an Apple Note, call it brainstorming ideas or ideas for social media. And then on Instagram, make a folder or like a little collection where you want to place that. So if you click the save button, which is like, looks like a little flag on the right-hand side underneath a post, you'll see that it comes up with collections and you can save it to that collection. So if you don't already have something like this, let's go ahead right now and create a new collection called social media ideas or brainstorm or ideas. Okay, so a lot of times we're spending time on our social media and we see things, and this is just a great place to go ahead and quickly store them. Also, I think like if you're a person where you're not getting a whole lot of ideas coming to you on the fly, then really carve out time, say even on a weekly basis when you're sitting down to have your coffee. It could be like generally like our brains are the freshest at the beginning of the day. And then the more and more we're exercising our brain, we're asking it to work for us, your brain power kind of wanes. So I like to recommend doing this generally in the morning. Now, maybe that might be a little bit different if you're not a morning person, but sometime at the beginning of your day when your brain is still fresh, start putting onto your calendar at least once a week a time to sit down and do some brainstorming. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. As you can see from this slide, like usually the best ideas come to us within the first 10 to 15 minutes of us brainstorming. After that, you'll usually find that you don't get the best ideas. So it doesn't have to be lengthy. It can literally be like 10, 15 minutes, but I say put it in your calendar or make it a regular habit because otherwise the week can easily go by and we just don't get it in. Any questions on brainstorming or ideation of ideas? I feel like a lot of times people are pretty good at this part of the process. Do any of you guys already currently schedule time to do this for yourselves? Mhm. And know too that the ideas don't necessarily just have to be for social media. A lot of times those same ideas can be used and maybe a little bit more developed out for your email messaging, for even like a piece that you might do that's a printed piece or something that you want to create a press release around. So it's just ideas that drive your content. It doesn't necessarily have to be just isolated to social media. Oh, good, Cullyhood. Yeah. I think making it a habit will make you become better and better at it. Um, because your brain, it's just like any muscle that you're exercising, it becomes stronger at that activity. So, Alex, when you put time into your monthly newsletter, so like there's two methods. The one I see most frequently is like a business owner will be like, all right, it's time to do that newsletter again. And they sit down and they start focusing on like what they can put in that dang newsletter. That's going to be great. And then there's that second method, which is a little bit more along these lines of like thinking ahead, is like collecting ideas, if you will, throughout the month, so that when you do sit down to make it, you can look at that and you've got already like a bunch of great ideas. Do you feel like you're more the sit down and focus in on it now, or do you find like you kind of collect ideas throughout the month for that following month's newsletter?
Yeah, I'm always thinking about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I usually have one of the artists that I represent. I focus in on them and I have one of their images and a lengthy caption about something that they're interested in or their way of making their art or something about the specific piece.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah, and then I have links to my website and to sculpture, painting, photography, large format printing, all the different types that we do.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point that, you know, oftentimes too, we're feeling like we have to reinvent the content that we're creating, and it feels like a heavy lift. But like the truth is, you want to think about it like um almost like reoccurring segments, if you will. Like I'm gonna use an example like, oh, you know that there's Cheap Eats is always going to be featuring a restaurant that has great deals and delicious food. You
Mhm.
can definitely think about your email and your social media content in the same way, where you've got a certain theme that you have reoccurring content for, but it just changes, right? So you're changing what you feature or highlight. And I think that if you are able to come up with those ideas too, that have a little bit more life to them, you can carry on something like that if it's successful and you're getting great feedback for quite a long time and people start to know you for it, then it makes it a lot easier to go to the drawing board and hammer out that content.
Yeah, I have a template that I've created with everything's consistent with my logo and everything. Um, but I never get feedback. unless it's from somebody that I know personally, like a friend.
Do you ever set it up so that you're specifically like asking for feedback?
No.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is like a lot of times when we put messages out there, we're not necessarily asking for feedback. And so we don't get any feedback because we're not directly asking for it. So, ways that you could potentially do that, or you could ask people in a way where you're polling them. Um, you want their feedback, you could ask them for them to give you certain ideas like um this is what we'd love to work on in the future. Of these three ideas, which would you be most interested in? And have them set it up so that it's very easy for them to respond. One free integration that you can utilize is called Survey Monkey. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah, so you can set up polls really easily, where they can just click through and give you answers, and then you can see how they respond and how many people responded. So you could utilize something like that. There's all kinds of ideas around that where you want to set it up for them to give you that feedback. Because a lot of times, otherwise, you're not going to see any feedback per se, other than maybe looking at click-throughs or sales.
Mm. And
Uh,
that's called Serving Monkey.
it is, yeah.
Interesting. It goes along with MailChimp.
I know. I've often thought that same thing.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So Gina, I see your question about, are there other things besides content and emails that you brainstorm as a business owner? Um, I mean, I guess I want you to expand on what do you mean by that?
Um, I was writing it and then I didn't really know. Um, I guess, well, I came up with some other things, like she was saying feedback, like how to get feedback monthly, maybe promos monthly.
Yeah, I'd say that's the other big one, would be like promotions.
Hmm.
Because I think our businesses are living, breathing, ever changing. And so obviously there's going to be some promotions that we always do that are successful for us, whether that's like around Mother's Day or Valentine's Day or graduation, or however your business is set up, that, oh, we're always going to want to do those promotions. But then there's other promotions that either they're trend based, or it's because you're seeing a pattern in your business and you're like, ooh, I can definitely create a promotion around that pattern that I'm seeing. Like, say for you, you're seeing that a lot of times, um, moms are coming in with their daughters.
Hmm.
Maybe there's a promotion that's somewhat around that idea. So I think promotions is a good one to regularly sit down and think about as you're looking maybe 1 month, 2 months down the road. Okay, what kinds of promotions do I want to do? Because if you know the timing of your promotions and you're thinking about it in advance, you'll know when to back it up and start promoting it to make it successful, instead of like, oh my gosh, it's coming up, like I haven't really promoted it at all. I've got to get going on that idea. You can have it actually in your calendar. Okay, first messaging on this promotion, I'm gonna plan it for this date. And then I'm gonna have like two other follow-up pushes behind that as we get closer. And you can look at the mixture of how you're promoting it as well. Like, I'm going to promote this more heavily with more frequency on social media because I know that only 2 to 4% of my followers are seeing this message. And then on email, maybe you're only promoting it once on email. So you can look at kind of like the mixture of how you're messaging it as well. And then I think like on a monthly basis too, we're for the businesses I work with, we're always asking ourselves, like, what other pieces will help the business as far as marketing pieces. So, for example, I work with a pediatric practice, and they've recently had a doctor leave them who was there for several years since they opened up their practice, and they had some new doctors join them. And so, that stimulated us to think like, okay, how are we gonna make sure that our referral pipeline is strong for these new doctors so that we can also help to boost these, patient bases for the new doctors. So we created like a printed out piece that had a little highlight on each of the doctors, the practice, and then it had a companion QR code that led to a page online on their website where it had video messages from each of the doctors. So, like
Nice.
looking at what other pieces are in the mix aside from social media and email that will help support the business. I think like you can't just like look at that once a year. You need to be regularly looking at that and thinking about things that could help you in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
for sure. Okay, so here's some just like questions to maybe get your brainstorming juices flowing. And also I'll share this deck with you when I send out the recap email. So don't feel like you have to like take copious notes or anything. I'll definitely get this to you guys. So one thing I think is like, what are some of the most common questions or misconceptions that people have about your business or product? Sometimes we kind of forget about that, but I think it's really important and it can be great content. Um, I feel like, Gina, that would be a great thing for you to cover with I feel like there's a lot of people that see other women with these like amazing lashes and know they have extensions, that they have so many questions and they just feel like a little ashamed to ask, or um if you could help answer those questions proactively, you bring down the barriers of them like potentially booking with you or reaching out to you. It could be industry news. What things do you have coming up? Again, events, sales, or promotions. It could be job openings, photos or stories that customers have shared. So I noticed too that some of you guys have done a really great job populating your highlights in your social media. But remember that highlights take someone to actively go into a highlight and look at it, which is part of the beauty of a highlight. So for those that don't know, if you look at, say, your Instagram and you look at a profile or your own profile, a highlight are those little circles that are underneath the text, but above the posts that you've created. And usually they cover different categories. And if you click on them, depending on how many highlights are pinned into that, or how many stories are pinned into there, you can see just a bunch of different content. So the highlights are an aggregate of your stories that you've posted and you've pinned to that highlight. So if you don't do that, you won't have any highlights, but it's a great idea to take the content that you've run through your stories and give it a little bit more longevity, and also help to categorize your content in a way where it makes it easily accessible for that person who's especially like initially first finding your business. A lot of times we have a lot of great content in there, but we forget that, again, that takes active consumption from the user versus like things that I might see in my feed because you've created a post. So don't forget to periodically go in and take that highlight and use some of that in like a reel, or it could be a bunch of like carousel posts where you actually then put it in your feed. Yeah. Reuse. I think the strategy of like trying to reuse your content in as many ways as possible is one that business owners can definitely appreciate because time is super limited. So also the other thing too that generally I'll do strategically is like whenever I create a reel, the next day I'll run it through the stories. Hey, new reel on this topic. Did you see it or check it out? So that you're basically pointing people that may not have seen your reel post, but are looking at your content in your stories. They're going to be like, oh, that looks interesting, or that's cool. Let me go check out that reel. And then it gives you obviously a little bit more content for your stories without having to do any thinking about it. So just getting into that practice is a really great way of recycling or making there be more longevity to your content. It could be team spotlights with pictures and bios. I think that's a great one because people want to know, they're curious. And usually we're really proud of our team members and we've got really awesome people working with us and around us. So don't be afraid to spotlight them. Expert tips, I think, is an amazing piece of content to focus on because you are the expert in what you do, and people want to see you demonstrating that because it helps them to trust you, gain more rapport, relate to you, learn something, find that there's value there when they're watching your content. I really like ASMR videos. So if you've got something that fits into that, that could be fun. Day in the life, packing orders, even planning things like if you're designing a new collection. People are curious what goes into planning that new collection. How do you design it out? How do you source things? Not like giving any big secrets out or anything, but they like to see like the process and kind of like come on that journey with you. So too, what I like to do when brainstorming is just come up with like a huge flood of different ideas. And just how they say like, oh, no idea is a bad idea. Don't try to filter out the ideas as you're going through your brainstorm. But then you can always go back later and really like highlight the ones you think are great, the ones you want to tackle first. And to kind of go through the filtering process after. Okay. Anyone have any ideas or things they ask themselves that they want to add to this list? I mean, and it could be endless. There's lots of things that you could sit down and do, but I think sometimes we forget, like we get so close to our business and it's just our everyday that we kind of forget about, oh, that's kind of cool. Or I forgot, like people don't, not everyone knows that about what I do. And those are kind of the things that I want to say, hey, go back to it. And also, if you touched on it, if there's a way to kind of like repurpose that content or say it a little differently, don't be afraid that you're being redundant. Because again, only 2 to 4% of your followers are actually seeing your content that you're creating. And a lot of times the algorithm is delivering our content to new potential followers. So to them, it's going to be new. And it's going to help to fill in the blanks of who you are and what your business is about. Okay, so here's some like tools that if you're a visual person, you might enjoy for the brainstorming process. There's an app called Mural, and then Zoom, there's Zoom whiteboards where you can put things in a very visual way to kind of stimulate creativity, capture your ideas. It can help sometimes if you're hitting wall with that kind of thing. And both of those have free versions that you can utilize. Actually, really like the Zoom whiteboards. I'm just reading your guys' comments. Yes, I see Erica is also a fan of ASMR. Oh, honestly, I don't really know what ASMR stands for. Does anyone know what it stands for? Audio something, but it's basically like the way something sounds like if you're unwrapping it or the sound that it makes when you're using it or
Oh, it says autonomous sensory meridian response.
wow.
I had a feeling S was for sensory too, but uh,
Thanks, Erica. Okay, so the next step in the process is going to be the content planning and content creation. And I'm going to really drill it down to just like three simple steps. It can probably get a lot more complex than that, but I think drilling it down to three steps really helps. So basically, I want everyone to be thinking about as they're planning their content. What do you want to convey? What is your objective? And so below that are some examples of what your objective might be. Maybe you want to educate someone. Maybe it's that you want to promote and sell something. You want to inform them about, it could be like a new launch or a new collection or some kind of change in your business. Perhaps it's that you're trying to collect feedback. It could be just developing your brand, telling your story, or it could be value building. So those are some of the primary objectives that you could be looking to achieve. But there's definitely are more than that as well. And then what imagery will you use to help you to do this? So I think a lot of times, this seems very basic, but a lot of times maybe we're not completely thinking it through in this way. And so we're getting back what we're putting into it, which is, okay, people are looking at it. Maybe they're giving it a heart, but we're not getting any sales or we're not getting any traction. We're not really sure what all that work we're doing is giving back to our business and our bottom line. So I think if you have more clarity behind why you're putting content out there, particularly like the objective piece of things, then you'll have more success at actually seeing a result. The other thing too is, by thinking about it in that way, I think it will also allow you to see the mixture of the messages that you're putting out there. Maybe it's a little bit light in a certain area. Like maybe you're never promoting or selling or doing sale messaging. You're never asking for the sale or never directing them to take whatever that next step is with you. And so you're not getting any of that because you're not directly asking them. I think like we too much of the time assume like, oh, well, of course that's why we're doing it. Why else would we do it? But if we're not crystal clear about like what the next step is, or that this promotion is only running till this date, um, a lot of times, like if we're not saying what's in it for them and how to proceed forward in a direct manner, people are just so bombarded by messages 24/7 that they're not necessarily going to like take action on something just from seeing it. So I like to say too that the mixture, generally for most people, a good mixture is going to be like 20%, no more than 20% of sale message. So I don't mean sale doesn't necessarily have to mean like, oh, this is 20% off today, not necessarily that, but actually asking for the sale, like we've got a limited supply of this, like click here to learn in more detail and get, yours today or whatever it might be. It could be actually selling the product or service. A 20% segment of what your content is generally like a good feeling amount of messaging to put out there that's still going to be effective. And then 80%, the rest of the pie should be devoted to some of these other objectives. And some of them are going to be like more long term, obviously, with like the value building, the brand development, and they're just like assisting so that when you do that sale and promotion piece, the result is stronger because you've been supporting it and developing it with all this other types of messaging. Okay, so So Alex, I see your question in there. I think like your industry is unique, and I think for you, you probably need to really get super comfortable with focusing in on who your decision maker is. Like, how is the decision being made? Who's a part of that decision? And then who's actually pulling the trigger on that? And I don't know, depending on those things, your answer could look different for the importance of Instagram or even social media to your business. I think it's definitely a nice to have piece, but for your business, I'm not sure it's a need to have an in a high frequency. But maybe then strategically you're just using it for a certain purpose. Maybe it's almost like a showcased gallery of like all the different options thematically like categorized so that you could send someone to your Instagram to look at lots of great options in a way that's not going to necessarily be like as formal as, say, looking at a website, but something that they might enjoy seeing pop up into their feed, but it's not necessarily something that you're directly trying to like reach potential new end users for you, for your business through social media, if that makes sense. Maybe like as we've identified with some others in this group, maybe like going a LinkedIn route with social media is going to make more sense where you're targeting more of like GMs or like people making facility people or whoever's designing
That's
the
what I've done in the past.
yeah, is like gonna prove to have more return on investment in your time than say like going the route of
I
being
was
heavy on
thinking,
Instagram.
sorry, I was thinking about reaching out to the realtors that work with luxury residential clients.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And maybe too, what you could do is like the luxury high-end properties, a lot of times they're looking for ways to showcase their property where they can creatively get people to attend like their brokers opens or their open houses. So maybe it's like some kind of art show or you're somehow bringing in some pieces to that property to really highlight the property that makes sense with that the already existing design that's there and it exposes like that audience to what you have. And then they can then get to know you and look to refer clients to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I had another thought, but it just left.
Hopefully it'll come back again. Yeah, so I think like, social media is different for all of us depending on our business. Don't feel like you need to have social media if it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Oh, I think it makes lots of sense. I mean, and I love doing my monthly newsletter.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I really get a lot of pleasure out of that. Highlighting the different artists and adding interesting content.
I mean, we're very, very fortunate to have these kinds of tools for little to no money to take advantage of. I mean, not that long ago, in order to reach this volume of people, we would have had to pay lots and lots of money to do that through like more traditional methods of advertising.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
we're very fortunate.
And
It's a great
LinkedIn,
tool.
I mean, MailChimp, you can join and send out as much as 500 emails for free.
Yeah, what an amazing tool, right? Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is just like a little kind of companion piece to really like you can take this slide or just like put it up on your wall or something like that to look at when you're doing your social media, to again get into that habit of what do you want to convey? What is your objective? What's the imagery that's going to help you to do this? And really begin like thinking of through those steps each time you're plotting out what you want to go ahead and post. Okay, so before I move on to copywriting, any questions on this phase of like coming up with what you want to go ahead and plan out for your social media? So nowadays Canva, particularly Canva Pro, has like some really great imagery that is super searchable. And I think it struggles a little bit to get us like the images we need with Hawaii feelings and like people and faces and stuff like that, but it's pretty good. It's come a long ways. Another site that I like to look at that has license-free imagery is Pexels, Pexels. So that's another good one. You do want to make sure though that when you're using images, don't just like source images from online. If you see something, I'm going to use that, because sometimes there are licensing and royalties that need to happen in exchange for usage of that image. And so, don't just like jump when you see an image online that you want to use. Make sure you're going through your due diligence, unless you're on one of those platforms where it's really clear, like, okay, I can use this image. And Canva has some great little video footage as well that you can utilize too. I used to have a Shutterstock subscription, but I really found like I didn't use it too frequently. So you can also turn to your own camera roll. If you do want to use images that say other people have taken and tagged you in, generally rule of thumb is if they've tagged you, it's almost like giving you permission to utilize it. But you can go through the process of just like reaching out to them and saying, hey, we'd love to feature you on our social media or in our email newsletter. Would you be okay if I used your post that you made, because we really loved how you communicated your experience or whatever it might be? Generally, 9 times out of 10 people will be like, yeah, that's awesome. And they'll hope to support that with good feedback and as far as like engagement when it does post. So you can always do that extra step of reaching out to them. Other things that when people share them on social media, if it's like a public, like another organization or another business, sometimes I'll reach out to them and ask them if it's okay if we share or support their message. But a lot of times, depending on what it is, like say it's an event coming up, uh, they want to get as many people there to their event as possible. And if there's an alignment of your audience and theirs, I just go ahead and share it. I'll share it, or I'll take a screenshot of the image that they've used to promote it and share it onto our own social media and let people know about that event or whatnot. It's not necessarily something someone would want to keep private or proprietary. You can tell they want the exposure. They want to get the word out, and this is going to help them. So in those cases, I say it's fine to go ahead and utilize it in that way without necessarily like getting their permission or approval. But yeah, I tend to keep a lot of different options on my phone that I can turn to and look at, and start thinking in this way. Like once you have categories of your content that you want to see on your social media or in your email, you can start kind of going through life collecting photos where you know that, hey, down the road, I might want something like this flower, this close-up shot of this flower, or that rainbow, or whatnot, so that you're almost creating your own little mini library of localized images. Any questions on this phase or step of the process. Anyone have any other like objectives they think are unique or different than the ones that were listed out? Does anyone regularly do polls on their stories? What kinds of polls do you do, Gina?
Not about my business. I just ask them random things like, take what you need today, a hug, a virtual hug, uh, whatever it is. Uh,
Oh, that's cute.
yeah, I try to do things that I feel like people will tap, and I like to place the pole closer to where people's thumbs are, so they're more likely to tap it versus like going, yeah,
That's a great tip.
yeah.
Yeah. Also, it makes sense because, well, most of us are right-handed. Um, and when we learn to read, we read from left to right if you're reading English. And that has trained our eye to have our eye rest for a longer period of time on the right-hand side of the page. So, and we're not really like consciously doing that. It's just a very subconscious thing from a young age that gets ingrained in us. So that's very also true to that rule as well. Um, so yeah, maybe too, like you could pull people on like, have you ever gotten lash extensions before to see like, oh, how many people in my audience or that my platform is reaching like are potential customers that have never actually done lash extensions or lash curls, but they're obviously interested in it. Or it
Mhm.
could be like, what occasion would you get a full set of lashes done for? And it could be like wedding, like graduation, or
Mhm.
whatever like you find people come into you for to kind of like it helps, I find too, to like get a sense of who you're talking to and like a little
Mhm.
bit more detail so that you know, oh, this is my audience. Okay, based on this, this is some of the content I could plan out that would really speak to that person. Okay. Anyone else do polling regularly on their stories? I think it's a great method to get people engaged. I find that generally if you make the polls easy, that um, which most polls are because they're like short and sweet, like you get really good engagement and response from it. And so if you get more, the more engagement that you get from a story, the more the algorithm will present that story to other people. And so it really helps to boost your efforts. So yeah, everyone make a poll in the next week on your stories. Okay, so the third step is going to be copywriting. So, this is kind of how I go through looking at copywriting. So first, I say it needs to have a good, juicy hook. When you're scrolling through content, you can see you only have so many characters, 75 characters, to get them to click on the greater description or on that post. So you want to make it something intriguing, really enticing or funny, or you could employ a lot of different strategies with that. But a lot of times too, I find that that doesn't come to me right off the bat. Sometimes it does, and if it does great, like run with it. But a lot of times I find that that's something I'm saving till the end, and I'll go back in and look at, okay, what could I make as a super hook for this content? So you want to have a good hook, and that should be the beginning of your post. Also, you want to think about what is the main point that you want to get across. So I'm going to use the example of like an event. Sometimes when we post on an event, we'll give them all the detail about everything going on and what this is all about. And then at the very end, we'll have a little part that says like, oh, here's the date or and the time and location. And we'll include that, but it won't necessarily be like upfront or at the beginning of our post. People have a short attention span, even when it comes to like your short social media description. So I always say, like, you want to put the most important thing first, more upfront. Maybe it's not the very first thing, but it's definitely going to be like within the first 2 to 3 lines of what you're creating. Also, too, it's because like sometimes people will be looking through things, they'll be like, that's interesting. They'll save it, they won't save it. But particularly like if it's an event, they won't remember maybe when that is. And so as they're like, oh, that event, it's getting closer. I remember I was like really interested in it. They want to go back to look at that information on your page, like, oh, when is this event or what time does it start? And you want to give them easy access to the critical information. They don't want to read through your whole dang post all over again to get to that part of things. They want to have it. And two, that means like formatting wise, you make it very easy. Like don't put it in some super wall of text where they're going to have to like read through it to get to it. Like really just keep it formatted very clean, simple with the key information. And then how can they get more information? So don't feel the need to be exhaustive with what you put in your description. Just make sure that there's a place where, hey, if they want more information, they can access it here. And that's why I'm like a huge fan of Linktree or apps like Linktree, integrations like Linktree, where you can easily click on your description in your profile. The Linktree pops up with like lots of quick, easy links to content that you set up, say, on your website. And it could be like our upcoming event, our next pop-up. Click here for the information. They click on your Linktree and it takes them to all of that great information on your website. And that's where you can do more of the communication of details, maybe like, what some of the other vendors are, what the entertainment's going to be, really like go ahead and be robust with that. But don't feel the need to do that all in one description on one post. Just give them the place where they can find it easily. And then tell them what you want them to do next. So again, back to my point of like, don't assume that they're just gonna like, oh, that makes sense. I'll just do this next. Connect the dots for themselves because we're moving at such a rapid pace and juggling and multitasking. A lot of times you have to just like be direct on what you want them to do next. So if there's like a ticket that needs to be purchased for an event, maybe that's the next step. To get your ticket, go to the link in our bio or whatever it might be. However, you want to direct them to make that next step. It could be, hey, make sure you're able to save a little money on this purchase. If you're interested in our new collection, click here and maybe the click is to your website where you then have a pop-up that says join our email list, save 10%. So really like the hook is going to be save money. And then your objective is to get them subscribed to your email list where you can then message to them more in a more direct fashion. And so you're sending them to your website because you know they're going to have that pop-up that comes up where ultimately they will save money. But thinking about those kinds of steps is really going to make a huge difference on what your result is with your social media. And it's okay if you've determined that the objective is just to like tell your brand story or develop value. It's okay if you don't have a next step, but just know that you probably won't necessarily like get any huge result from those. Those are again are just like supportive pieces.
I have,
Any,
I have a
yeah,
question. Sorry.
yeah, go for
Um,
it.
did you say last week that just like a picture is not really worth much on social media anymore and that we should stick to reels? Like, should I only post reels or
I mean, that could be a strategy because video content is still like one of the best methods to engage people with, particularly like short form videos, like how social media is perfect for. But I have found that carousels of images, like multiple images, still perform really well. So I wouldn't not do that and only do reels unless you just find that that's going to be like the strategy you want to go deep with. I think carousels still perform really well, which is just like kind of like a photo album, if you will, of images. What I have
I
said,
misunderstood what you said last week, I guess. I was
yeah,
thinking about my page and I was like, I should be doing more reels. But
well, what I have said is don't just post one image.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, because you don't get that second chance at engagement. So again, if someone passes by and doesn't interact with your post, what will happen if you look at your own feed, you can see this, like not that long after they've passed by that post, the algorithm delivers them again in their feed, that same post with the second image that you've put in your carousel. So it's a second chance to engage them. But if you only upload one image, you don't get that second chance. So save yourself and don't just post one image.
And another question about stories versus images or reels. So do unique viewers, I forget what the terminology is, but do which seeds, like people that don't follow you, which do they see more of?
Um, there's no real rule to that. There are some people that stay very vertical in stories, like that's their primary method that they are on Instagram looking through stories. A lot of people like stories because it's fast and it's quick, and they determine the cadence of it. Like if you click on the story, it will skip ahead to the next one. So some people that are like, very into the quick content, they're much more apt to be in stories, like looking through things than they might necessarily be like looking at their content in their feed. But I think a mixture of both is really important.
But for unique followers, for people who already follow you, for people who don't already follow you, where are they most likely to find you? Through
I
posts
don't,
or
I think it's either or. There's no like one that favors necessarily the person. It used to maybe be a little bit different back when the algorithm, when you followed someone, you really only got the content given to you that you follow those people from. And so your feed might be pretty much isolated to pretty much the people that you follow. And then maybe your stories might have been a better at that point strategy in reaching new people. But at this stage in the game, the algorithm is delivering your content into so many new people, new followers, potential followers, eyeballs that it's, I would say there's not one that's weighted more to getting you new people. They're kind of even. Okay. Did that answer your question, Katie? Okay, cool. Okay, so your final steps are going to be to just, after you do that, refine your first draft. And I always say, like, you have to look at how can I use less to say more? Because again, sticking with that idea that people are very ADD and scrolling fast and through a lot, you just want to be very concise, and you want to have a tone, like you want to have a certain voice that you're cultivating that is yours, your brand. But don't feel like going the route of being overly flowery or really telling that story in a specific way that is lengthy is good. This is not the platform to do it. Like, let's save that for like our blogs that we're doing, content that we're creating that's a little bit longer format on our websites, things like that. Social media is not really the place to do that. And then add in hashtags. So hashtags are still one of the best ways to help the algorithm to index your content. So obviously, you can look up hashtags and see content from people that have that hashtag. That's one way where hashtags can work for us. But more importantly, I feel is that hashtags are indexing your content. It's telling the algorithm, like, this is what is in this post or reel, and I want you to show it to people interested in this topic. Okay, so it's really more for the algorithm than it is for the individual user to add those hashtags. So every social media person kind of has like a different thought on this, but I generally say, and I found consensus with a lot of other social media managers on like 5 to 7 is usually a pretty good amount of hashtags. You can use similar hashtags or even the same hashtag if you want, but I always tell people don't just copy and paste the same hashtags into every post. Otherwise, the algorithm will begin to really kind of question if you're a real human on the other side, or if you're more of like, is this just like a bot creating this content because there's no change to these hashtags, even to the order of the hashtags. So definitely don't go that route of just like copying and pasting everything. Usually each post should have like two more unique or specific relevant hashtags to that particular post that you're uploading. And then go back to the hook, as I mentioned, and create something that will make someone curious, that's humorous, or maybe a little clever. It's a cliffhanger. Here's where you can use some fun emojis. A juicy question that makes someone feel like you're speaking directly to them. Make sure you kind of like think about that a little more carefully and create a killer hook at the beginning of your post.
Let me ask a hashtag question.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the best place to put them? In your post or in a comment in the comments? Because I've seen both.
Mm-hmm. I still sometimes see it in a comment. Um, Old school social media was put it in a comment. It seemed to perform better. Today's social media, there's pretty much consensus to put it within your description, not in a separate comment. And a lot of us have like kind of played around with it to see how we feel performance wise that does by switching it up. And I do think putting it within the post has better performance results. But I usually do it like at the end of the post. Sometimes I'll like even put it a little bit further down where the average person is not necessarily seeing it or it's not necessarily processing. Because again, it's really for the purposes of assisting the algorithm more than it is for the individual user.
So I see people like putting dot, 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 like down 5 rows or something. Is that so that it kind of doesn't clutter up the message when you're just scrolling so you don't see it until you open up the post?
Yeah, or just like separation from your primary content again, because it's really for the algorithm more than the person.
I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Any
I was
other
wondering why people did that too, to make you kind of go down in the comments and just put a dot, and then I was wondering that too.
any other questions on anything that we covered today, including like these final steps? So, and again, we'll send you this and the recording, but I did want to quickly show you guys. Oh, did my whole thing just close?
I do have one question, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
So as an artist, when I'm creating like an Instagram account that's dedicated to my art, how would I copyright an image of my artwork or like my poetry or something so that it's safe as content? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Probably by, I mean, you can't 100% guarantee that it won't be infringed upon, but having some kind of static verbiage that's on all of those posts that says like, um,
Like a
this,
watermark on the image? I don't know how to do
well,
that.
you can have a watermark on the image, but, or you can just say in the description, like, this image is copyrighted and cannot be used without the artist's permission.
Okay.
Something like that, where you just make that a part of every post. Or
Okay.
you
All
could
right.
also choose to put it in your bio, but I think if you have enough characters, it makes sense to put it within the description on your post.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, my whole thing just closed out, which might mean it wants me to just save it for another day. Hold on, let me see if I can quickly get into this.
It's nice to know I'm not the only one who runs into technical difficulty.
My gosh, right, right when it's most important to you. Okay, maybe we save this for now. I basically wanted to show you guys, so, and you guys can do this too. I'm gonna stop on your own before next week's class, but like one of the things I want everyone to take a look at is what posts within the last 30 days, and then also maybe looking as wide as like the last 90 days, which is generally as wide as the Meta Suite will allow you to look. But which posts performed the best based on two things, based on reach, how many people saw it, reach, and then based on engagement, how many people engaged with that content, and really take a look at what kinds of content you've put out there that have gotten the most reach and engagement, because that's going to give us a really good idea of like strategically where we want to go. Because again, those are feedback points of people saying, we like this content, we want more of this kind of content. So that's why I had, for those of you who weren't here last week, I had asked everyone, hey, if you've not been on your MetaSuite dashboard, which is a little bit more in depth than just going in app and looking at what you can source through like Instagram specific or Facebook specific, look at the MetaSuite and what it shows you insights wise, as far as like looking at both platforms and then comparing what both platforms are telling you. Because sometimes there can be variance too, because the audience is a little bit different. Sometimes you'll see, oh, this is what performed well on Facebook, which is slightly different than what performed well on Instagram. So we're gonna actually go a little bit deeper into that next week. And so in preparation for that, if you did not already log in and look at your MetaSuite or set that up, then go ahead and do that. But also, like for those of you who have already gone through that step, really take a look now at like the content that is performing well over the last 30 days and over the last 90 days.
Good call. I'm gonna put my email in the chat like I said I would earlier. Um, thank you. I agree, like I think you break things down really easily, even though I'm still not feeling super confident on just what, how, when to post what and but these are really good tips, so thank you so much. Um, any final questions for Ryan? The time goes so quickly because my brain is
Oh,
really
okay.
trying to keep up. I appreciate you so much. Okay, if not, we'll look forward to seeing everybody else next week, Monday, for our third class. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to look at, because thank you for explaining too what the difference between reach and engagement are, because I wasn't sure either on that. So, all
Yeah.
right, everyone, have a
Alrighty, thanks,
wonderful week.
guys.
Go get them. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye. I'm recording.